Bonjour, Monsieur Poilievre.
Bonjour.
Christian Noël de Radio-Canada.
Hello, question from Radio-Canada. Welcome to Vancouver. We'd like to see you more often in Ottawa. You have a very controlled media strategy. This is the first time you have called the press together in over 60 days at a press conference. Well, that's not true. That is not true. Please correct me then. I did have a media availability in Toronto a few days ago as well here in Vancouver. I took 40 minutes of questions. So I did have availability for the media. I had a very lengthy interview with a journalist from the National Post. So I have had media availbilities. It's not true, then. You must have the facts. If you're going to ask questions, you need to have the facts straight. Thank you. The end of my first question was about the press conferences with the Ottawa Press Corps. Some people say it's because you're not brave enough to do so. Well, I am here. I'm taking questions here. There are journalists across the country. It's not just the parliamentary journalists who control the agenda. So I would like to thank you, and I ask you to please correct your facts, because you're wrong. You're wrong to say that I have not had media availabilities. I have. I took questions from journalists. But it's not just journalists on Parliament Hill who are allowed to ask questions.
Well, yes. First of all, the question had factual errors. The questioner was saying that I have not had press conferences. In fact, I've had press conferences in Toronto, in Vancouver, and I've had one-on-one sit-downs with journalists. So the facts were wrong. I am speaking to journalists, and I remind you that there are journalists right across this country. It's not just the parliamentary press gallery that gets to control the agenda. We get to talk to journalists across the country and to Canadians. That's how we reach out.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Mon suivi, juste pour dire que les faits n'étaient pas complets parce que je n'avais pas terminé ma phrase, mais merci d'avoir corrigé ou de
but thank you for correcting me and clarifying. Second question. Communications director of your party believes that the World Economic Forum is controlling governments across the world. What message do you think that sends to Canadians?
For Canadians, for the people of this, en français.
In French, please. I'm working for the real people here, the citizens of Canada. My priorities are to reduce inflation and taxes, balance the budget, and fight violent crime. Those are my priorities, and those are the priorities of my entire team.
Yes. The federal government is set to release a new strategy on China and the Pacific. It says it wants to work with China on issues like climate change, nuclear proliferation, non-proliferation, but also challenge Beijing over threats to Taiwan, free speech in Hong Kong, the treatment of Uyghurs. What's your response to that new strategy from the federal government?
Well, I have to see the strategy. So far, there has been no strategy. When it's published, we'll comment on it. I think it's very troubling that the Prime Minister has known about allegations of foreign interference in Canadian elections since last January, and he hasn't taken any action. I haven't seen any evidence of action from this government to protect our democracy from that kind of foreign interference. I think Justin Trudeau needs to explain why he knew and why he did nothing. We need to protect democracy for Canadians. No foreign government should have any influence over our elections or our future. If that should reside in the hands of Canadians, and so far that has not been the case with the Prime Minister. He has failed to protect our democracy. On a more global level, we need to have a government that stands up for human rights and for freedoms and defends Canada's interests in an increasingly dangerous world. Thank you.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Oui. Merci.
Thank you.
Selon les reportages de cette semaine,
according to this week's reports, the Prime Minister was aware of political interference in our elections by a foreign government. He'd been aware of this since January and did nothing about it. There are two elections where there are allegations of foreign interference by a foreign government. The Prime Minister had the information and did nothing about it. So we are proposing that the government should be taking action. And I'll repeat it in English after. The Conservative Party will call a committee to conduct an inquiry into the allegations that were published by Global News. There should be news in a few minutes, and this would be news of a meeting of the Proceedings Committee. The aim would be to conduct an investigation into this.
For meetings to investigate the allegations of interference by the Chinese Communist government in our elections. We're pushing for these meetings to happen at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. We believe we have enough signatures to make those meetings happen, and we can get an investigation going into what the Prime Minister knew, what he's going to do about it, and how we're going to protect our democracy from foreign interference.
Good morning, Mr. Poilievre. Miguel Santamaria, Global News. As you've already mentioned, Global News reported the Prime Minister was briefed by CSIS on significant interference by China in the 2019 election. Your party has promised to get tougher on foreign interference, as you mentioned. How concerned are you about the CCP's alleged interference campaign in Canada, and what exactly would you do differently if you were in power?
Well, we're very concerned about the allegations that came to light that the Prime Minister was briefed of foreign interference in our democratic process as early as January. There have been widely publicized allegations of interference in 2 consecutive elections now, and nothing done. A Prime Minister who sat by and done nothing. He's resisted even opportunities for us to investigate this interference. And so that's why Conservatives have forced hearings at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee to investigate the facts, to find out what happened. We're looking at potential proposals that would bolster our counterintelligence, that would protect Canadian citizens from intimidation, and that would expose any level of interference by any foreign government in our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Another question. We have heard extensive testimony at the Emergencies Act inquiry, including concerns from police and national security agencies about elements inside the convoy. Has any of this changed your view of whether the Emergencies Act should have been invoked? And if you had known what has been revealed into testimony so far, would you still have supported the convoy? Do you still support it now?
So my position is the same as it was before the convoy arrived, the same as it was during, and the same as it is now, which is this. I support those peaceful and law-abiding protesters who demonstrated for their lives and livelihoods and liberties, while condemning any individual who broke laws, behaved badly, or blockaded critical infrastructure. I think it's possible to support the overall cause of personal free choice in vaccination and the overall cause of respecting the trucker's ability to earn an income, while holding individually responsible anyone who behaved badly, broke laws, or blockaded key infrastructure. That was my position before, during, and now.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre.
Thank you.
Hi there, Brenna Owen with the Canadian Press. This question is actually from my colleagues in Ottawa. Do you support Danielle Smith's assertion that when a province doesn't agree with a federal law, the province can choose not to enforce it?
Look, Justin Trudeau has created divisions right across this country. He's turned west against east. He's turned provinces against the federal government. He has just yesterday caused a massive blow-up of meetings on healthcare funding. So they walked away without getting anything done. The problem is not any particular premier. The problem is the Prime Minister, who's created these divisions and caused people to feel like they have no choice but to engage in conflict with the nation's capital. I think we need to do is have a Prime Minister that will respect provincial jurisdiction, allow our resources to be developed, and get things done with the premiers, rather than picking pointless fights and dividing Canadians for political advantage.
The Prime Minister has divided Canadians. We saw this yesterday with health meetings. The premiers were unable, these are the ministers of health, were unable to come to an agreement to support our healthcare system. Justin Trudeau likes it when there are scuffles. I don't want to divide Canada. I want to unite our country. And I want all our premiers to be on the same page of serving Canadians. The fact that there are premiers across the country who have controversial proposals when it comes to control. It's the Prime Minister in Ottawa who is dividing them, and I would be a Prime Minister that would unite people.
A little bit more on that in terms of, I suppose under your government, how might you approach a province that was choosing not to enforce a federal law or expressing opposition to it?
Well, premiers have the right to express opposition to any law they want. That's as old as Canada. What I would do is, first of all, I'd stop attacking provincial jurisdiction. Trudeau passed Bill C-69, for example. Well, the courts have found that C-69, which attacks our energy sector, is unconstitutional. Now, we'll see how that plays out in the appeal to the Supreme Court. But it's not just premiers that are saying that the Prime Minister's laws violate provincial jurisdiction, it's the courts. So whether it's his carbon tax, which he's imposing on the provinces against their will, or it's his attack on our energy and resource sector, or it's his obsession with going after law-abiding, vetted, trained firearms owners, duck hunters, sport shooters. He constantly attacks provinces and people rather than working together to get things done. In a Poilievre government, you'll have a Prime Minister who will respect provincial jurisdiction and avoid these unnecessary fights.
Mike Hager, Globe and Mail.
Yes.
Mr. Poilievre, what's your assessment of the evidence at the convoy inquiry so far? And you mentioned that, there's a few individuals. How do you estimate how large a group those individuals were as part of the larger convoy?
Well, we'll find out when they publish the findings of the hearings, but my position was before the convoy even arrived, during its presence in Ottawa and thereafter, that I support the law-abiding and peaceful protesters who were demonstrating for their livelihoods and for their liberties, while simultaneously condemning any individual who behaved badly, blocked critical infrastructure, or broke laws. That's how our system works. We hold individuals responsible for their actions, and that's what I would do.
But your assessment of the evidence, you didn't answer the question.
Well, my assessment of the evidence, as I said at the outset, will come when the report is provided. We don't have a report of the findings. When we do, I'll give you an assessment.
Okay, and every other political leader takes questions on Parliament Hill. These newsers you spoke of, we didn't get any advance notice, I hear from colleagues. Why don't you take questions from the media?
Well, I'm taking questions right now.
On Parliament Hill, regularly like everyone else.
We'll take questions. We'll also, remember, it's not just the parliamentary press gallery that controls the agenda. And I think that's what's going on here, is that the press gallery believes that it should dominate the political discourse. I believe we have a big country with people who are not necessarily part of the press gallery. Multicultural media. I've held multicultural media press conferences to reach out to new voices who are often shut out of the political debate on Parliament Hill.
But you're there most of the time. That's the point. You're there in Ottawa most of the time.
I think that part of the problem is that we're all too obsessed with Parliament Hill. We need to be out in the real world to talk to real people on the ground, everyday people who are living their lives under the terrible policies of Justin Trudeau, who can't pay their bills, who see crime going wild on our streets, who can't get children's medicine in their local pharmacies, even though it's available on the other side of the border. These are the stories of everyday Canadians. These are the stories that I want to share. These are the problems that I want to solve. And it won't just be the parliamentary press gallery that has a voice anymore. All Canadians are going to have a voice.
Thank you.
So, thank you.